Hello everyone, welcome back to Maoli Azameti channel. Today we are diving into the second and the final part of the track expiration application. So let's see what we will achieve in this video. First of all, we'll define the data model, define a repository, and then connect the UI to the data source. Let's get started. First, let's talk about MVVM, which stands for Model View View Model. It is a popular architecture in Android development, but today we are keeping things simple. For this tutorial, we'll focus on just the activity connecting to repository. So this approach is great for beginners who want to understand how the UI and data layer work together without adding too many moving parts. So for the data model, we have this structure. This is how our data will look in the database. So the products that we'll be storing will have an ID, a name, a note, and an expiration date. So the product ID will be random string characters. And then we have the product name, which is compulsory. The notes will be optional. And then we have the expiration date, which will convert to a long data type. So there is something we call CRUD operation in programming. So the CRUD is an acronym that stands for create, read, update, and delete. These are the four fundamental operations used to interact with data in most applications. Whether you are working with a database or an API or in-memory data like our example, CRUD forms the foundation for how we manage and manipulate the data. So you use the create to add new record to the data source, and then the read retrieves the data from the system, and then the update modifies an existing data, and then we have the delete that removes the data from the system. So this is how the whole application structure is. So this is the UI. The UI will request these operations, and we'll define these functions that represent this operation in the repository. And these functions will be interacting with our data source, which we'll call product list. It's just a variable in memory data that we'll be interacting with. So let's get into code. So this is our previous design that we made. We have the product list, the product detail, the form for creating a new product, and individual item. We have the menu icon as well. So when you come to your project, the first thing you have to do is you right click on your project folder, you select new, you come to packages. So you create package or a folder called data. Then you create a Kotlin file. We'll call this product. So from this table, you declare a variable called ID, which is of type string. And then the name. It's also string, and then the next one is the note. So now we have our data class that represents our data model. Create the repository. So you come and create a new class called product repository. But this one, you have to change the class to object. I explained when and how to use this object keyword in my Kotlin series. You can check that out. But basically, you have only a single instance of this class in the whole application. This centralizes your data management. Inside this class, we will create all the methods that will represent our CRUD operation. Guys, before we continue, take some time to subscribe to the channel. Like the video. By so doing, you promote the channel. Thank you. So the first thing we have to do is to create the data source. So create a private variable called product list. So this list will hold the list of products that will be added to the application. This represents our data source in the repository. The functions that we'll create will interact with this data source. So you create a function called add product. This function will take the product as a parameter. Then what this function will do is to take this product and add it to the list. To do that, first reference the product list. And then there is a function available called add when you call this add method, then you pass the product to it. And that's it. That's all required to add a product to this list. The second one is to read. So you create a function that returns the list of all products. So this method returns all products, and I call this method on the list to sort it by the date. So you can read all products or read just a single product. So to get a product, you need the ID of the product to search in the list. So we take the ID and then return the product list. But we call a method called find that is used to search through a list. So we call the method and then say if the product ID is equal to the ID that was passed, then that item will be returned. So we are getting this error because we are returning a product. However, we've not declared the return type. So you will come in between the curly bracket and the bracket and then put a column there, which you pass the product we are returning. And then you put a question mark there for nullability, because this function can search through the list and either find a product in the list or not. So when the product is available, it will be returned. If it is not available, null will be returned. Now let's work on the update. So to update a product, you require the new product and then to replace it with the old one. So to do that, you create a function called update product that takes the updated product. We have to search through the list to find the product which ID matches the updated one. So to do that, we need the index of that product. We'll go through the product list and then call a method called index of first, and then we find the ID where it's equal to so we take the new updated product, we loop through the list and then check if the ID matches. When the ID matches, that product index will be stored in this variable. So now we can use this index to access the product from the list. However, we have to handle the situation where you make the search and none matches. So that will be null. So if none matches, this function returns -1. So we'll check whether it is -1. If it's -1, it means that none matches. But if it is not, it means that it matched and we can go ahead and perform this update. So to do that, you check whether the index. What's happening here is that this function takes the updated product and then uses that product ID to search through this list. When it finds a match, the index will be assigned to this variable. If it doesn't find a match, then -1 will be assigned to this variable. So here we are checking if it is not -1, it means we find a match. Then we'll assign the new product to the old one. It's left with the final method. So you create a new function called delete product that takes the ID of the product. There's a method called remove all. We'll pass the ID and check if it matches and then remove the item from the list. To do that, we use the product list and then call the function remove all. So now we have our repository ready, which defines the data source and then all the functions that can be used to interact with the data. So now we'll go to our list to connect the UI to the data source. So when you check from the UI, the main activity is responsible for showing the list. So we have to build a recycler view and then adapter. We've learned it in the previous episode, so you can check it out. So let's create the adapter for this list. Right click here and then select new, create new Kotlin class. Call it product adapter. Extend list adapter. We pass our data class. And then finally our div class. Put your mouse on it, you get the option to create this class. Select the third one, which creates the class inside this class. You should extend div util class dot item callback, and then you pass the product. Put your mouse here to implement the necessary methods. So this one requires that you return the old item compared to the new item. Okay, so this one requires that you return the old and new item. The next class to create is the view holder. The view holder must extend recycler.viewHolder, and then you pass the layout to the class. So the superclass will receive it as binding.root. So now define the function for binding items, which takes product, and then let's implement the compulsory methods for the adapter class. Let's start from the binding, which call the holder and then call the bind method. So you come to the onCreate view holder. So here create a variable called binding, which is equal to item product dot inflate. You pass the layout from parent, pass parent dot context, and then pass parent again, then pass false. Now you have to return product view holder and then pass the binding to it. You are done for this one. We have to implement click listener so that we can navigate from the list to the detail screen. We will use the lambda function. We'll say private val on item click. So when the item is clicked, we want to pass a lambda function which takes the product and then returns nothing. So we have to pass this method to the bind method. So this one will complain now. Put a comma here and then on item click. So the next thing we have to do here is to set the data to the view. So we have binding dot name, product name dot text is equal to product dot name. So we'll do the same for the rest. So because the view in the layout is expecting a text, we have to convert date that we receive, because the date is a number and this is a text. So we have to convert the date to a text that can be assigned to this UI over here. So to do that, we'll create a function responsible for converting the thing from a number to a string. Create a private function called format date. It takes a long type and then convert it to a string, so it will return a string. So now we can return, there's a class called simple date format that converts your date to any format that you want. So date format, then you pass your date format and then you call something called locale, get default, and then you call format on it, past date, the timestamp. So this is the date pattern that I want. It will show something like Monday, the month, the day, and then the year. So you call this method here to return the string. It is not available here because we have to define the function inside the view holder. So you copy it and put in the view holder. Now we can pass the date that we get from the product. But we want to put a message there that expires in this date. So to do that, you can do string extrapolation. So you put all in a string, then you put a curly bracket around it, and then you put the $sign here. Okay, so now you can put your message there that expires. So it will show expires in this date. So we've shown the product name and then the expiring date. So I think for now, let's run our application and see if it works properly. Guys, before we continue, take some time to subscribe to the channel. Like the video. By so doing, you promote the channel. Thank you. It is important that when you build application to a certain point, you run it often so that you make sure everything is working after your changes. So whilst the application is loading, you come to the main activity to instantiate your adapter class. Let's also use the data binding. We've not enabled the data binding. So to do that, we'll come to our config and then enable data binding. Like in our previous video, you come to the Gradle file and then you type build features, type view binding is equal to true. Click on sync. So back to our activity class. So let's create a function dedicated for handling everything recycler view. So when you create the function call like this, you can just put your mouse on it to create this function. So inside it, I'll do my initialization of the adapter. So I'll call adapter.submitList, and then I'll call our product repository, and then I'll call the get all. So we had this error here because the get all is supposed to return list of all products, but for now we've not specified the return type. So to fix that issue, we'll come here and specify the return type, which will be list of products. So after adding the list of products, change this method to sorted by, not sort by, sorted by. So the error is gone. So let's run the application. Alright, so our application works correctly, just that we don't have any data to display now. So let's go ahead and work on this button in order to add products to the list. Navigate to new product activity, do the binding setup. We have to navigate from the main activity to this activity. Come to your main activity and then set up a click listener. So that one too, I'll create a function for that. So I'll click on it to create that function. So all what it does is that it sets click listener on floating action button. So now we use intent to open this activity. Create a variable for intent this activity, and then you pass where the class you are going to. Select class.java, import the intent class. We have to start activity and then pass the intent to it. So now when you run the application and you click on this button, it will open the new product activity for you. So our navigation is working all right. Now let's go to the new product activity to configure everything over there. So you can see that product name input field and then the add note is working. But to open the date picker, you have to set it up. So I'll create a new function called setup date picker. So to set up the date picker, you create a variable called calendar. Which is from the calendar class. Now call the date picker dialog class. So pass the context and then a style. We don't have this style yet. To create this style, you come to your project file, look for theme. On the theme, the first one, you come below the line 10 and then create a style. So add this custom style. Once you have it, then you can come to the new product activity. That error is gone now. At the end of the style, you open and close the curly bracket. So inside of it, that's where you declare the dates format and all that. I'll copy paste all the things into it and then I'll explain to you. From the date picker, we retrieve year, the month, and the day of the month and set it on the calendar. And then from the calendar, we retrieve the dates in terms of milliseconds. So it is this millisecond we assign to this selected date. And we also pass the format, what we want to see in this input field. So now let's create this variable. Now let's set click listener on this field to trigger it when we click on this input field. We have our binding dot expiry date and then set click listener. So inside this click listener, we call this method. Let's run it and see if we can show the date picker anytime we click here. So you click here. Okay, so now the date picker is showing. We can pick our date and then we'll get a preview of the date we've picked. So now we can go ahead to retrieve this name and then notes and then click on the save button to save it. Now let's set up a function responsible for saving a new product. I'll create a function called setup save button. You create the new function. Then we'll call the click listener here. And then here, let's give the responsibility of saving the actual product to the list into a new function. I'll create a new function called save product. I'll create a variable called product and then set it equal to the new product. So I have to set the ID. And then the next one is the name. So the name, we can retrieve it from binding dot name dot text and to string. And then the notes, we can also get the note from binding dot note dot text and then to string. So this can be null, so make sure you add the null pointer exception to it. Then the last one, which is the expiring date. So the expiring date will be equal to the selected date. So after creating a new product, then we call the method from the repository to add the new product to the list. So this is responsible for saving the item to the list. So this one will create the new list, assign an ID. So we have this inbuilt class called UUID that generates random numbers. So you can use that to generate your ID and then we receive the name and then the note from the user, and then the date selected from the user. When we click on the save button, this will call the save product to save the item. So now let's test it out. So I'll enter a new product, say milk, and then I'll pick a date which is 25th, and then I'll send a note. And then I'll click on the save button to save the item. So that item is saved alright, but when we are done saving the item, we need to navigate back to the list page. To do that, there's a method called finish that you need to call after saving the item. So you call that method here after saving the product, then you call finish. So let's test it out. So let's create a new product. Then I'll click on save. Okay, so this one clears the new product activity and then return us back to the list page. However, the list is not showing. This is because we have to call the get all product method in order to refresh this screen. So to do that, we'll create a method called refresh in the main activity, refresh product list. So what that function does is to call this product list on the adapter. So I'll copy this and paste it here. Once it's here, then I'll call this method here. So you make it private. That's why we are seeing that little warning over there. And then again, we have to call this method in on resume. On resume. So when the list is about to show to the screen, then we call it to prepare the data to be shown. So you override lifecycle method called on resume, this one on resume. Then inside it, you call the method refresh product list. Now let's run it. So I'll save it. So there we have it. Congrats if you're able to manage to get to this level. Congratulations. So let's add another item. And I'll save it. So we have the next item. Now our list is working. We are getting the title, we are getting the date as well. It's left with the count, the number of dates left. So we have to work on this one. So to do this, we have to go to the adapter to fix it. Because this is coming from the adapter, the list is coming from the adapter. So we need to fix it at the adapter level. So come to the product adapter and let's see how best we can fix this issue. So we'll come here and then call the binding dot dates left and then set the text equals product dot. So here we can't use expiring dates because we are actually counting the dates left. And the date left, to get a date left, you have to calculate the difference between today's date and the selected date, the date that was picked for the product. You have to calculate the difference between this date and today's date. So let's create a function that will be responsible for calculating that date difference for us. So to do that, you come below the format date method. You create a function find dates left, expiration date, and then it will return the number of days, which is an integer. You create a variable called today and instantiate it to the calendar. So it's as if you pick today's date from the calendar, then you extract the hour of the day, the minutes, the seconds, and the milliseconds from that date that you pick. And then we'll create the same for the expiring date, but for this we'll pass the expiring date that we received from this class. So now we have to calculate the difference. So you create a variable called diff, which will be equal to the expiring date. We get the time in milliseconds minus today's date dot milliseconds. So I'll find this difference. Once I get a difference, then I'll return that difference. So the difference over this to int. The difference is in milliseconds, so we have to convert it back to days. So now we can use this method here called find dates by passing the product date that we have, expiring date to it. Let's assign it to a variable dates. Then we can use it here, say dates, but we need an integer, so I'll say to string. So let's run the application and see. Create a new list, and then when you save it, then we have 78 days. So what we want to do is that we want to give this count color grading. So if the number of dates is less than 0, we put the text expired and then we make it red. If it's equal to 0, we say today. If it's equal to 1, we say 1 day more. Anything other than that, we say, let's say 70 days. So we have to make some checks before we assign the dates to this guy. So we can say when the days is less than this, is equal to expired. Let's test it first and see if it's worked. So let's create a new item. I will save it. Okay, so we chose 1st January, so it shows expired, so it's working. Then let's continue and finish the rest. I think I would like to extract this whole thing into a function. So this function will take the dates left and then return a string. So it will compare the dates left against this condition. Once the comparison is true, it will return this message. So now we can call the dates left over here instead of writing all this here. So we can say format days left and then we'll pass the days. That's all. So now we can go ahead and run it and see. So let's create a new item. When I save it, I'll get 13 days. Okay, so I'll see expired. So now we have to add the color coding. So we are just going to change the background color for this test. So I'll create a new function for giving the color code. So what it does is that it works like the dates format, but this one returns colors. I'm just taking the dates count and then I compare. If the dates count is less than 0, then I return this color, which is red color. I define these colors in the color resource. So when you come to this color resource, so add these new colors for the grading of the items. Okay. So when you come here, then your error will be gone. So I'm just checking the dates and then doing some comparison the same way here. So when I search the dates, I set this text. But here, when I check the days difference, then I set the color for it. So to use this, we'll call the function called color code and then pass the days to it. Let me assign the color here for background. So once we have the background color, we can call the binding days left dot days left dot set background color, and then pass the background color to it. So let's test it. So let's create a new item. When I save it, I'll see this yellow indication and then it's telling me 1 day more. I'll not have any issue. Right, so when I pick today's date, let's see, I'll get this. Then let me choose a previous date, expired. So this is how it works. So we've added the color grading. This is the method for returning the color, and then this is the method for returning the message, whether expired or the number of days left. And then we have this method for formatting our date into this format. Okay, into this format. And then we have this method that calculates the difference between the dates. So when it calculates between today's date and then the date that has been given, this gives you the number of dates. So there's nothing new. It's just this method we are using to check the number of dates and then the color grading. So these are just the 4 new methods we added. So this error is coming because of the private. It's asking to make private. So now we are able to add item to the list. So when you come here and you click on save, we've not added anything but the saved work, which is a bad design. We have to verify and make sure that the user really enters a product name and then pick a date before we save the product. So to do that, we have to go to the new product activity and implement what we call validation. So it's a check that we perform. You check the user input before we accept the input. So let's create a new function dedicated for validation. So I'll create a variable called isValid and set it to true. So this function returns a boolean to tell us whether it is valid or not. So let's return is valid. So if it's true, means that the input is valid. Okay, so now let's take them one by one and validate them. So first, the product name. So I'll check if the product is empty or not. So to do that, you use the binding dot the product name, and then we pick the text and then check whether it's, so select is null or blank. So we want to check whether it is null, that's there's nothing in it, or it's blank. So if it is null or it is blank, we'll set an error message. So I'll copy this text and then set a message. So you change it to error. So I'll send error message to the user that product name is required. Since it is blank, we have to update this variable to false. So I'll say is valid. I'll set it to false. So we have 2 compulsory input field, which is date and then the product name. Now that I'm validating the product name, I'm leaving the date for you to validate it by yourself in the comment section. Let's get interactive. When you are confused or you have any doubts, just drop it in the comment section. I'll answer you. So now you can call this function before calling the save product. So I'll call this function here before I'll call the save product. So I'm calling this function which returns true or false. So if it's true, then this function will run. If it's false, then this function will not run, but the error message will be sent to the user. So make sure you set the error message on the layout, that's name layout. So I mean this one, set the error message on this name layout. So let's run the code again and see. So when you come here and you click on save, now you receive an error message. So make sure you complete this part. So when we save, we can save it now successfully. So now let's look at product detail. When you click on it, we want to view the product detail. So you come to the main activity and implement the navigation here. To do that, we use the intent. So we have the intent for creating new products. So I'll just copy this one and paste in the adapter and then change this part to detail. Let's run it and test it. Alright, so we will come here and create a new, and then I'll hit save. So when I click on it now, okay, So it's not going because inside the bind we've not implemented the click listener. So to implement the click listener, you use binding dot root and then you set on click listener on it, and then you call this click listener on item click listener, and then you pass the product. So let's run it. Let's add a new item. So when I click, now it takes me to the details screen. So this information here is a dummy data. We have to go to the detail activity and update this information here to the product that we passed to this screen. Product activity, we do our setup. So inside the main activity, we have to pass the product ID to the detail screen. So we'll add extra information by using intent.putExtra. So the name will be product ID. And then the value is it.id. So when I go to the detail screen, I can retrieve that information by using intent.getStringExtra, and then I'll pass the name. So the name has to be the same as the name you pass from here. So you can come here and copy the same name and then paste here. So now you pass the information from here, which is this data, and you retrieve it with the same key. So now I can assign this. Let me create a variable here. So now I can say the product ID is equal to what we retrieve here. So now that I retrieve the product ID, I can use the product ID to get a single product by calling getProduct, this function from the repository. So I'll come here and then call product repository dot get product, and then I'll pass the product ID. So now the product that I get, I can also save it into a variable. So let's create a private variable called product. So I can now say product is equal to this. Now that we have the product, we can set it to the UI. So to do that, we have binding, then I'll use apply the scope method. So I talk about scope method in my Kotlin series. You should check it out. So when there's no notes, we show no notes added. The onCreate method is getting bigger. So let me move these things into a function. So to do that, just select the function and then right click on the selected, look for refactor, select function, and then call it load product. Okay, so this automatically creates this function for you. And then this is for displaying the product. So I can refactor that one to a function called display product. So we should rather call this display product inside the load product, so that as soon as it loads, then it shows the product. We left out the rest because for the other ones too, we have to do the encoding, color encoding, and all those stuff on the detail screen. So we'll attend to that one after this. Let's run it and see. So let's add a new product. So when you save, you have this. When you click on detail, so you see the product name. This is the product name. So to get the other one, we need to do the same thing we did in the adapter. So I just copy those functions to here so that we can use them. So change the binding.root to this in the detail activity. So once we change that, we have the color code, and then we have the method for finding the date difference. You've already seen that. And then we have this one that calculates and then show message. Here the message is quite a lot, but there is the same as this one that shows some message as in expire 1 day and all that. So this is doing virtually the same thing, just that it has a lot of message, so you can go through it. So let's call them in our display method to show the rest of the messages. So to show the days left test, we first of all have to create the days and then call the find dates method, pass the product expiration date to it. Then we have dates left. Now we can set the test to days by calling format date detail and then passing the days to it. And then we can also call the color code to change the color. So I'll create a variable called test color, which will be equal to the color code method. I'll pass the days. So this will change the color and then this will set the test. So we are having these errors here because the product and then the ID can be nullable. We can fix them by using let scope function. So what we'll do is that we'll check for the product ID. So now let's run it and see. So add new product and then go to the detail. So now we have this information here. So this is the exact day we pick and then the time remaining. So we can add another product. So the date is not updating. Let's check that out. Okay, we've not set the date. We have to set the date by calling expiry date dot test and then we'll call the format date and then pass the product date to it. So from here, let's receive the product directly. So once we have this product, we can remove all these null pointer checks. So wherever we call the display, we have to pass the product to it. So now let's run the application again. So let's create a new item. So our product detail is working alright. So now that our detail screen is working, let's see how we can implement the edit and then delete method. So first, let's start with the delete method. So to delete an item, we have to implement this click listener on this icon over there. So this icon on the toolbar is called menu item. This is a menu item. So to implement the menu item, first you have to inflate the menu item by calling a method called on create option menu. So you just type on create option menu, so you find it in the list and then you select that one. Inside the on create menu, inflate the layout. So this one just shows the menu on the screen, but we have to handle clicks. So to handle clicks, there's another method called on option item selected. So type on option item selected. So you select this one. You change this one to when item dot item ID. Okay, so you can set the super to the else block. So we'll find the ID for the menu. So the menu ID is delete. So I'll copy it and then come here and say when the ID matches ID from the menu, delete. So return true. So before you return the true, you have to delete the item. So we'll create this method called show delete confirmation, because we want the user to confirm the deletion. So you create a dialog in Android by calling alert dialog, and then you call the builder, and then you pass the context, which is this, and then the style. So we choose the same style. So now you can set the title for the dialog. Now we can set the message. We have to set action for the response. So we have the negative response and then the positive response. So to set that, you can say positive, set positive button. So we'll pass this function. We take some parameters. So just type dash dash, and then you give it this. So inside here, then you call the action that should be done when the result is positive, when the user selects the positive answer. And then we have set negative action. We just want to dismiss the dialog. So to dismiss the dialog, you pass now. So you are done for the negative action. But for the positive action, this is where you call the product, and then you pass the product ID. So here to we call product repository, and then we call delete product, and then we pass the product ID. So once it's done, we call finish to navigate to the list screen. So when done, call show method. So this is the method that will actually show the dialog. Then come below this set content view, add this line of code. So this one sets up toolbar for you, and then this one also enable the back button on the toolbar. So let's run it. So create a new item, click on this, and then when you click on the delete, you see this message. This the title. You see the title and then the message, the prompt, and then you have the option to delete or cancel. So when you click on delete, it deletes the item and returns to the list. And one thing you can notice is that when we come to the detail screen, we have the back option enabled, and that's with the help of this line. Okay, so you can call this line in the inner activity. For example, so you can copy this line and paste in the new product activity. So this line enables the back press button, but when you click on it, it doesn't work. To enable that functionality, you have to override a method called on support navigation app. You call a method called on back press. So once you pass that one, just return true. So let's run it. So let's add new item, 2 items for now. So when I save this and I click on detail, I'll see the back item. When I click on back, it will turn. Okay, so now it's working. Our back is working. So I added this same line to the new product activity. I added the same line, but I've not implemented the listener, the app navigation app listener. So I implore you to copy this and then paste in the new product activity listener, and then you implement the same on the edit product activity as well. Okay, so now what's left is the edit functionality. So we want to edit. For now, we don't have the activity for edit, so we'll just create a new activity, select empty view activity, edit product activity, click on finish. So we'll do the cleanup and the setup here. So actually the edit and the add new product are virtually the same. The edit updates an existing product, whilst the new product adds a new product to the list. Go to the add new product and copy everything over there and bring it to edit product. And then you can change the context to edit product, and then change the title to edit product. On the toolbar, change the title to edit product, and then the button, instead of save, you can say update. So now that we have the layout for the edit, we'll go to the edit activity to continue with. Guys, before we continue, take some time to subscribe to the channel, like the video. By so doing, you promote the channel. Thank you. So from the product detail, using this icon, we have to navigate to the edit screen. So we have to attach a click listener to this floating action button. So come to the product detail. Inside the on create, you can set up edit button, and then create that method. That method also uses intent. So I'll come to the main activity, I'll copy that intent. The intent that passes data to the next screen. I'll bring the same thing to here. So now I'll pass this. So this activity has to be product detail, and we are going to edit activity. So we have to create an intent, pass the product ID to the edit product screen. So let's add the click listener to it. The banding called edit product, set on click listener, and then we'll pass this code inside the click listener. So let's test it. So when you click on the edit button, it takes you to edit activity. So now we can pre-fill this field with the information based on the ID we receive, and then we can also edit it and then save or update. So let's check it out. So when you come to the edit screen, we will retrieve the ID by using intent.getString extra, and then we pass the name of product underscore ID. We create a variable to hold the selected date, the product ID, and then the product itself. Now I can update the product ID to this value that we retrieve from intent. Based on the ID, we have to load a single item from the list based on the ID. So when you come to the detail screen, I think we can use this same method. Copy that function and paste here. So product ID. So you get a product ID, then you load the information based on the product ID. Let's call it field product data. So let's create this function. Use the scope method and then access the product name. Use set test method, set test, and then pass the product name, and then do the same for the note, and then do the same for expiry date. But we have to format our date again, so we'll call format date method and then pass our product.expiry date. So now let's create the expiring date here. So I can just copy it from the detail screen. I can just copy this date and then bring it to the edit screen. So let's call this method here. Let's hit the run to test it. So when you click on the detail, you see your hello and all that. But when you click on edit, you see your information filled. So now you can click on it to edit it by adding text field. So we also need to set up the date picker dialog again over here so that we'll be able to select and change the date picker. So let's do that. So I'll just go to new product and copy the date picker. So I'll bring it here. So let's put a click listener on this field. To do that, you come to your view and then do your binding dot expiry date, set on click listener, and then I'll call setup date picker. So once the user click on it, it will open date picker. So we'll perform all the validation that we did on the add new product. I'll bring the validation function and then the save function. So I'll copy the validation function to the edit class. So this is for validation. Make sure you complete the validation for the date. I'll copy the save product and then bring it to edit So here I'll call it update product. So I'll change it to update. But we have to update based on the ID, not a new ID. So we'll call product ID. So we'll use the ID and then pass the ID to the ID. So we'll not generate a new ID, but we'll use the ID that we retrieve from the detail screen. So we'll pass that ID to the same product. We can call this one updated product. So we are just updating the name, the note, or the expiring date. We don't update the ID because you use the ID to uniquely track the items. So we update these ones. Now we can add a click listener to our update button. Set on click listener, and then I'll call the validation method. Then I'll update the product and then call finish. Now let's test this. So let's create a new product. Click on the detail, click on edit. So change it to test 3. Change the date from January 25th to 30th and then save. When you come to the detail, it hasn't updated. The reason is that we have to call the load function in the onResume method. That's what will update the UI. So you can come outside here and then override onResume, select onResume and then pass load. So when the user returns from the edit screen, the load method will be called when onResume method is called. This refreshes the detail screen to show the latest data. Let's test it. Now we are able to update a product successfully. So this brings us to the end of this video. We've learned a lot in this session, and in the next episode, I'll teach you how to publish this application successfully to the Play Store. Watch out for more video. Subscribe, like this video, and share the video. Thank you.